There are two bead knitting techniques, one in which the beads are placed between the stitches and one where the beads are incorporated directly onto the stitch. This video will show how to place the beads between the stitches, and it's called beaded knitting. Only the knit stitch is used, and the knit stitch is the basic knit stitch that's used in almost all knitting. For demonstration purposes, I'm using size 6 seed beads and sport weight yarn. Most of the projects that I make, however, use size 11 seed beads and size 8 pearl cotton. For beaded knitting, beads are strung on the thread before starting the project. Most patterns will tell you how many beads to string. Usually the beads are all one color. The steps for a stitch are: start your stitch in the normal way, slide a bead right up to your knitting, and finish your stitch. Beaded knitting patterns will vary in how they describe the beaded stitch. Some patterns will tell you to knit a stitch, slide a bead, knit the next stitch. There is no standard for how to write out the stitch. But in my patterns, I call the beaded knit stitch a BK1. I consider the bead and the stitch following the bead to be one complete stitch. So in a BK1, my patterns will say start your stitch, slide up a bead, finish your stitch. That's one BK1. Start your stitch, slide up a bead, finish your stitch. The 1 in the BK1 refers to one bead. If you're sliding more than one bead, then the pattern will read BK2 or BK3. Finish your stitch in the normal way. In most patterns, you will leave 2 or more stitches on the edge of your project unbeaded. In my patterns, you will see that the pattern directions for a project like this will read knit 2, BK1 12 times, knit 1. Remember that a BK1 consists of the bead and the stitch following it, so the second to the last stitch is really the last BK1 and then one knit stitch. So in effect, there are 2 knit stitches for the selvage edge. As you knit, the beads are going to the back of your work. When you turn your work and start a new row, the beads again will go to the back of your work. So be sure that when you count your rows, you count the rows on both sides of your work. In other words, if the instructions say repeat row 1 8 times, count 4 rows on one side and 4 rows on the other side of your work. That will make 8 rows. This completes the beaded knitting demonstration.